Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Fighting the Void. Me, Ginger, here again to discuss whatever it is that's going out in the world, whatever it is we can do to combat the creeping nihilism that seems to be threatening to tear down society, hence the void that we're busily fighting against. And with me, as always, is my internet sister, Crystal.
Hello.
And joining us today to talk about the rise of cultural Marxism and its encroachment on many of the Christian churches is Jeff Dornick of the GK Podcast Network.
Hey there, really glad to be involved with this. I've been looking forward to joining you guys and being able to chat. So thanks for having me on.
Same here. This should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now, a couple hours ago, before this, part of Fighting the Void, it's not just all talking about politics or culture and everything. Sometimes it's doing stuff, right? So, I've been working with my two oldest kids, and we've been getting ready to go out and do a massive backpacking trip. We're going to be hitting the Appalachians here in just a couple of weeks, and it's going to be awesome. So we did a training walk this afternoon, and we were out for 2.5, almost 3 hours. So it was the first time we actually put on our actual backpacks and went for a long walk with them since last summer when we did a 2.5 day backpacking trip. And we did like 6.5 miles out there and got some strange looks from people who were like, why are you walking around with a giant backpack on your back and trekking poles? And we're like walking down in the direction towards the beach. So we're definitely not dressed appropriately at all for the direction we're headed.
Yeah, that would definitely seem odd.
Yeah.
Especially considering y'all are gingers. So it makes people especially suspicious that you're about to steal souls of everyone en masse.
Just the fact that we're even headed in the direction of the beach, since we're gingers, is just wrong to begin with.
Exactly. What are you guys planning to do? Steal some souls and get sunburned? Like, you're gonna end up looking like a lobster.
Yeah, it's gonna wind up looking really, really horrible by the time we're done with it. But I was happy. I didn't realize that it was 6.5 miles till I got home, and I actually checked on my phone, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it was that far?" Because I was starting to get worried because one of my kids was having a really hard time keeping up on the way back. It was like we stopped and we got a couple of milkshakes as we were going at the turnaround point, and instead of giving him energy, it like sapped it. It was like he was gone.
Oh no!
All of a sudden the legs like turned to jelly, and I'm like, dude, come on. I was starting to be like, I don't know, is this kid gonna be able to handle it? Then I checked on the phone. I was like, 6.5 miles. Yeah, we're good because we'll have all day to do our hike instead of just like 2.5, 3 hours. So I think we're gonna be okay. So that little bit aside, Jeff, you've got this big podcast network which includes your own podcast.
Yep. Yeah. And go ahead. Yeah.
So what is the GK Podcast Network? What do you discuss on it, and how many? Since it's a network, obviously it's more than one podcast. How many people do you got on there? And I don't know, lay it out for us.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, all of this really started. So I used to be on Brandon House's network, Worldview Weekend Radio.
Okay.
And then after a period of time, and there was some controversy, which I never find myself a part of controversy, but there was some controversy. And so basically I was like, you know what, I would rather, if people are going to be giving us heat, I would rather take the heat for myself and not let somebody else take the heat for me. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to go out and do my own thing. So I'm not going to, so that way I'm responsible for me. And so basically so I started it out by having my first podcast, Conversations with Jeff, which is basically just me and a guest. And we just talk for sometimes anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. And we just talk until we feel like, okay, we covered what we want to cover, and just kind of have good conversations. And because I feel like that's missing a lot in society right now, is just being able to converse, interact, have differing opinions, debate, disagree, all that kind of stuff. And so then it kind of evolved, and I I started bringing on more contributors that started writing blogs on the website. And then I'm like, let's just full on make this a podcast network. So then I connected with my buddy Sam Jones and his co-host to bring on their podcast, the Shining Light podcast. And then I've got a few other guys that are going to be coming on within the next 2 months or so. And basically what we do is we just look at the world from a Christian worldview and just kind of discuss issues, sometimes politics, sometimes theology, sometimes whatever it is. And it's just, some guys with some perspectives, and we're okay with disagreeing with each other.
Okay. Very cool. How many podcasts are part of it, did you say?
So right now it's 3 podcasts. I have 2 myself. I've got one other with Sam and Patrick, and then we're bringing on about 2 or 3 more in the next couple of months. So
very cool. All right, sorry, I hit the mute button there for a second.
Yeah,
I'm talking, and you're probably not hearing me.
Yeah.
All right. So, also as part, you had another side project going while managing all these different podcasts and this network and doing your 1 to 2 hour interviews. This new book that's coming out. Now, I found out about it from Paige Rogers, who we've had on the show multiple times, and I know. I just following both of you on Twitter. I know you guys interact a lot on Twitter, getting into some of those controversies that you mentioned. Yeah. And so it's Social Injustice is the name of the book, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, now social injustice. What do you mean by that?
Sure. So basically, more up until a couple of years ago, this was a movement. Social justice was a movement that was primarily going on within like politics and that sort of thing. Then 2016 happened. Donald Trump became president. And for whatever reason, that infiltrated into the church, into Christianity, into the evangelical church. And some of the main players within the social justice movement are organizations like the Gospel Coalition, Tim Keller, kind of some big names within, especially the Reformed camp. Okay. And so, they're promoting a lot of the progressive ideals that we're seeing in mainstream politics. They're almost parroting word for word guys like Bernie Sanders, AOC, people like that. And we're just like, how did this come into Christianity? So
first thing I can say is welcome to my world, because I'm Catholic, and I remember discussing years ago with my brother and a friend of his talking about how they were basically talking about some of the various, we call them the social justice freaks that seem to be in just about every parish, and the same sort of thing. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of liberation theology. Yep. This is something we've been fighting for a very long time, and which is particularly interesting and frustrating because socialism/communism is the only political system that has actually been officially condemned by the Catholic Church, and yet it's the one that Catholics seem to be most prone to want to go to. If they're going to get away from Western democracy, they're most likely to head towards that direction. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's like, really, you picked the one. So I totally understand where you're coming from as far as that goes. Like just kind of waking up one morning and being like, wait a minute.
Well, what was really interesting was that I want to say about maybe 10 years ago or so, there was the movement within the evangelical church called the Emergent Church. And that was led guys like Brian McLaren. I know Mark Driscoll was a part of that for a while, Rob Bell. But within evangelicalism, those guys were kind of seen as the fringe. It's almost like they were so far left. It was like, are they really Christian at all? And so for at that point, it was kind of like, okay, they're way over there. Let's condemn them. But it's like they're not infiltrating our churches. It's like they're starting their own way over there. Whereas now, Tim Keller, who is kind of the link between the Gospel Coalition and the Emerging Church, he started the Gospel Coalition, and then all the mainstream players all joined forces, and then everybody's looking at it. We're just like, where's the discernment? Where is this being able to figure out what's truth? Because you guys are partnering with the social justice. I call him the godfather of social justice, Tim Keller. And it's just like it to me, it's just nuts that you have these guys that you have the Bible, You've got, your conservative ideology, and then all of a sudden now you're embracing progressive political activism within the church, and it just makes no sense to me at all.
Right. Now before we go any further, I want to make sure we define our terms a little bit. When we talk about social justice, especially when we talk about it in a negative sense, what are we talking about?
Yeah, of course. And so basically what this really comes down to is it's creating multiple classes of people where you have oppressors and victims. And so basically you can look at it whether it's dealing with race issues, whether it's dealing with immigration issues, whether it's dealing with wealth, income inequality, that sort of thing. Basically what it's doing is it's saying that your problems are caused by somebody else,
right?
And that you are the victim of an oppressor that's coming after you, and they may not even realize it, that they're actually oppressing you, because it has absolutely nothing to do with their actions. It has nothing to do with their thought process. It's the fact that you may be a white male oppressing even a white female or a minority female, or there's this hierarchy of people, and then if you're up here, then you're going to be oppressing somebody down here. And it's one of the, I keep saying it over and over, but it makes no sense to me.
So we're kind of talking about a combination when we're talking about social justice, we're talking about a combination of Marxist class warfare and modern intersectionality, essentially.
Yep.
Okay. And I wanted to clear that up because I think there is a legitimate use of the term.
Yeah.
And but that's just essentially promoting the idea of, hey, help a brother out, man.
Or actual justice. Like actual justice is a legitimate thing.
Yes, actually, you would think so. You would think we would still be able to do legitimate justice, but
yeah.
And as soon as you put that word social in front of it, it does tend to promote the idea of a collectivist notion that you do get an idea where it becomes a group thing, whether it's one group, one group oppressing the other and that sort of thing, or it's like we have to get all of society on the same page, whether they like it or not, to do this thing that I've decided is justice. And that's usually where you run into trouble, when it goes from, hey, promoting the idea of these guys over here, they've got a raw deal, we should probably do something to help them out, to saying, okay, we're going to use the political system to force everybody to do it.
Yeah, but the other side of it too is that when you create these different groups of people that are, you have an oppressor and oppressee, you've got an oppressor and a victim. What it's really doing is to a certain degree, it's demotivating the people that feel like they're victims, to where they no longer have to take responsibility for either their actions or their lack of wealth or whatever it is. Like, to me, you should be motivating people. Okay, let's lift you up out of the lower class. Let's get you into the middle class, as opposed to saying you're down here because this rich guy that's the CEO of this company took all your money. And it's like, does that even logically make sense?
Yeah, and that's where the issue comes in of what we're calling social justice, of it's actually hindering issues that legitimately need justice, applied to them. Like example I see sometimes brought up that's actually accurate is, for example, with like the Me Too movement and all those movements about like, oh, these are the usually inaccurate statistics of women who are affected by sexual assault, domestic abuse, violence, rape, and it's like the social justice that hinders the legitimate cases. It hinders, the male victims of sexual abuse and violence and whatnot. It hinders, and I've seen some people bring up the fact that no one talks about how in the LGBTQ community, there's a high level of domestic violence in lesbian couples. No one talks about that because they're focused on like, man bad, they rape, woman good, they victim. It's like, that's not how it works, people. We're ignoring actual things that need to be addressed because we're too busy telling you, no, stop it. You're creating things that aren't there.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where, again, it's like you have these because of the different classes, it's like a man can do no right and a woman can do no wrong.
Right.
And especially when you look at things like Me Too, we've seen so many issues of discrepancies of, and also the other side of it too, when it comes to Me Too, is everybody who's ever experienced any negative thing between a man and a woman, all of a sudden now I feel like it devalues actual abuse. It devalues rape, because all of a sudden now it's like, yeah, this guy hit on me and I didn't want it. And all of a sudden everything is seen as equal to rape. And it's like, Harvey Weinstein is a horrible, awful man, but that's not the same as a guy who, you know, is trying to flirt with a girl and she didn't want it. And so that devalues what Harvey Weinstein did, because everything is seen as the same.
Exactly. This weird leveling mentality of the left that it ultimately makes no sense. But then again, so bottom line, social justice, like most things on the left, is actually the opposite of what the words imply. It is neither social nor is it justice. So back to the book. Now you wrote this, or you pulled this together because this has a number of contributors to it.
Yes.
You pulled this together as a response, as like you said, to the progressive mindset starting to infiltrate especially the various Protestant churches, but it wasn't just that. It seems like I was looking a little bit on the website. It seems like it's also a bit of a response to the fact that there was this Dallas statement that was supposed to be like, okay, the line in the sand against this very infiltration that has, well, let's just say it's about as effective as our border.
That's a really good way of putting it. I hadn't even thought about it, comparing it that way, but so basically, for people that don't know, so there was the Dallas statement, or it's also known as the Statement on Social Justice. And it was spearheaded by a lot of guys in the Reformed community, especially guys within the John MacArthur crowd and that sort of thing. And it was supposed to be the response to social justice, and it was basically going to itemize and lay out, okay, this is where we disagree with social justice. It explains why and how we believe it compromises the gospel and that sort of thing. And in theory, it was a good idea. Like, it was definitely something that should have been done. The problem with it is that they drew this line in the sand and said social justice is wrong. Now, the problem is usually when these statements come out, and there's been several statements in the past. One was, there's been some about marriage. There's been some about ecumenicalism. There's been some about all these. They sign one of these statements, and then this is important enough for us to draw the line in the sand, and we're not going to partner with you in ministry. We're not going to partner with you in whatever projects we're doing if we disagree on this, because we feel that this is so important. Yeah. The problem is that they drew them in the sand, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, nothing changed. It's like, so what was the point of writing that? So, for example, there was the Shepherd's Conference, which happens every year. It's a pastor's conference at John MacArthur's church out here in California. Okay. And everybody was really surprised that he still invited some pastors to come speak at the conference that were pro-social justice, guys like Albert Mohler, Mark Dever, Liggett Duncan, people like that. And the concern is that conference is designed for the top pastors to train 6,000 or 5,000 pastors, or however many pastors are there, to then go back into their churches. So why would you invite people that disagree with you on something this vital and this important? And then from the stage, they did a Q&A session discussing social justice, and it was probably one of the most awkward hours that I've seen streamed. It was just like, it was like hostility, and nobody actually wanted to be honest about what they believed, and it was just, you could tell there was so much tension there. And then John MacArthur gets up there, who's the main proponent of the social justice statement, and he goes, I'm going to fight error, but I'm not going to fight my friends. Essentially giving a pass because these guys are his friends. And a lot of people feel like he just completely undermined the social justice statement. And then seeing this unravel more and more and more from the guys that wrote the statement, they're just undermining it left and right. And you can kind of tell that they didn't really understand what they were getting themselves into when they wrote this statement. It's like, it was almost like they were hurried. They didn't really get a firm grasp on how to actually deal with this. And they're giving passes to people. And that was kind of, I was like, okay, somebody's got to do something, because these guys are just completely failing at this, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I can relate. It's like you get a really good sounding statement, and then where's the follow through? What is it?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what difference does the statement make? And so, but not only is the statement itself may be good. I assume the statement itself is relatively solid.
It's decently solid. I wish that it went into more detail and explained, in detail the response. But overall, it's a pretty decent statement. The statement itself.
But again, there's little follow through, and the very crafters of it, as you said, are undermining it, and which of course winds up introducing all kinds of confusion. Because when you've got somebody who, with the name recognition of James MacArthur, saying, "Hey," or is it James or John? I might be getting my J Mac mixed up. John MacArthur, James MacArthur.
John MacArthur.
I'm sorry, I'm getting my J Max mixed up.
Exactly. Okay. Easy to do.
You got somebody with the name recognition of John MacArthur going, well, I'm not going to fight my friends. And then everybody sitting in the pews, Joe Sixpack sitting there is like, well, my friend over here, he watches nothing but MSNBC and the Ellen DeGeneres show. I don't want to fight him. And, and so it gets to be you're not just back to square one, you're worse than square one, because now people heard the great statement and they kind of know what they should be going to, but they have zero direction on how to get there. And the example from up above is essentially, you know what? Get together and have coffee every now and then, and that's about it. That's all you really need to do, baby, is have the occasional conversation, and that'll be good enough. And so and then it introduces, okay, well, what is error? Exactly, because if you never see them fighting error, because the error is coming from the dude's friends, what do you do then? For the guy sitting in the pew, what do? You're not giving an example to follow, and all the signals you're sending are at the best mixed. So this is social injustice is a response to this that's meant to sort of to set the stage for a proper response to the encroachment of progressivism.
Well, yeah, and I think the really when I decided to really put together this book, John MacArthur, in one of his early blog posts, he had written that social justice is the greatest threat to the gospel in his lifetime. And so a few years earlier, he had the Strange Fire Conference, which was him going up against the Word of Faith movement or the extreme charismatic movement, because at that time he felt like that was the biggest threat to the gospel. Okay. And so back then, he full on separated from people. He's like, look, if they're teaching this, we can't partner with them in ministry because they're compromising the gospel. Here, it was like, this is an even greater threat, but we're not going to separate because it's my friends. And so that, to me, I think set a really bad tone. Yeah. And so when you're looking at something like the gospel, so like us within evangelicalism, we believe that salvation is by faith alone, has nothing to do with works. You can't earn it on your own. And God is saving us from our own sins, and by his death on the cross, and all we have to do is place our faith in him, and then we'll be saved. Well, what's happening is a lot of these guys, they're twisting the gospel around to where Jesus is now saving us from oppression as opposed to saving us from our sins. And there's a difference. And so it is a threat to the gospel. And
you're getting full on liberation theology, man. That's exactly where this is going.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
And I'm asking this question in honor of a friend of the show, Nico. in honor of me. If technically, if you're half Asian, half white, could half of you be trying to oppress you? Hence, Jesus is trying to save you from yourself.
Oh, jeez. So you may not know
that's the
you may not know Nico on Twitter, Jeff, but she's kind
I don't think so.
Okay, she's libertarian on Twitter, very active, and she's very like anti SJW, and is always talking about, well, is my white half constantly oppressing my Asian half? So what I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. Yeah. So yes, as Chris was putting it. So does that mean Jesus does still save me from myself? But only my white half?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, one of the podcasts that I really like watching and listening to that outside of the whole Christian world is Dave Rubin, because he has some great guests on there, great conversations, that sort of thing. So he was actually out here in California nearby. And so we actually went to his stand-up show at the Improv. Oh, cool. And part of his shtick during the show was, okay, raise your hand if you're the most oppressed person in the room. So then it became a contest within the room to figure out, okay, who is the most oppressed based off of either your race or your gender or your identity or whatever it was. So that was actually pretty entertaining to try to figure out, okay, who's the most oppressed in the room.
Yeah, you do have to wonder that. Who is the most impressive in just about any room? Matt Walsh, he just did a thing on his last show. It's like, so am I? He got injured doing something or another. So since I'm a cripple, do I now have intersectionality points? Have I jumped up the ladder? And he went through the whole thing. And of course, one of his listeners sent in an email. It's like, no. You're a straight white male. You can never move up the ladder at all, unless you claim to be a woman, in which case, as Walsh put it, you rocket right up to the top.
Well, that's a problem too. Wait.
Go ahead.
No, but there's real life like implications of this too, because if you're looking at some of the articles that are coming out, even now for colleges, I believe I was reading an article where they're saying that with SAT scores, there's going to be a secret score that's going to be sent to the universities that you as the test taker are not going to see. Only they'll see, and it'll be based off of your intersectionality score.
Yeah.
And so there's real life implications of this. It's no longer just opinions and the way people treat you. This is like real life implications.
Yeah, they're calling it what was it, the social adversity score or something like that is what the official name of it is.
It's crazy.
It's like it's intersectional affirmative action essentially. Because some people are saying it's a response to the increasing push in some areas to get rid of affirmative action finally. And they're like, well, we're not going to do it. We're just going to call it this instead. It's like, oh, you people never learn.
Look, man, they're just trying to empty out the cry lockers. They don't want the cry lockers anymore. They got to figure out the way to get rid of it somehow.
Something. But as you say, Jeff, this is becoming an increasing issue in the Protestant world, and I'm starting to see it, even though I don't pay a ton of attention to what's going on there. I get frustrated enough with the politics of my own church. Thank you very much. And but you can't help but notice. Like I was watching Crowder the other day, and there was a story about how some church actually covered up the cross so that some Muslims could pray in the church during Ramadan. And then there was another one who sponsored a freaking drag queen story hour. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me right now? It's like, what is going on? It's like, if anything else, well, obviously I'm going to have numerous disagreements in certain areas. At least the evangelicals, I thought, I'm like, at least, they're solid in what they believe. But now it's like, oh, you're getting the same corrosive nonsense, and it seems to be operating extremely quickly. That's what's really interesting, or distressing, I should say, is that this acid seems to be eating away very, very quickly. Now, that just may be because I'm on the outside looking in. I suppose it's entirely likely that it's actually been kind of eating away at the foundations for, sorry, my headphones popped out, for some time, and I just don't see it. But yeah, I don't know. What would your read on that be? Is this up coming out of nowhere and just really eating away very quickly, or has this been building for a while and it's just now getting the attention it should have gotten 5 years ago?
Honestly, I think it's both to a certain degree.
Okay.
I mean, we know that cultural Marxism has been growing and growing and growing for decades and decades and it's been around for a long time, right? It's even been slowly infiltrating the Protestant world and evangelicalism, but it was always fringe. But then for whatever reason, over the last 2 or 3 years, it's just exploded within the main, like, Bible believing, Bible teaching, like, Christian pastors. And I think that's what's kind of taken a lot of us by surprise, is how quickly it's come into the guys who you used to think were the last line of defense against theological error. Like, you would think that these guys would know better than this. And I think that's the concerning part about how quickly it's coming in. I mean, you've got full on SJW guys like Matt Chandler and David Platt and Tim Keller and Tabidi, and I can never pronounce his last name, so I'm not even going to try. But these guys are like hardcore social justice and racial reparations and just, you know, the intersectionality. And it's like, how, I don't know. It really is, to a certain degree, kind of coming out of nowhere, at least within our camp within evangelicalism.
Okay. Now I see. I'm looking at the comments on YouTube, and you got Tamara saying it's been building for a long time, perhaps bubbling below the surface. Well, like, okay, now amongst the leadership, it seems to be coming out of nowhere. What about? And you're going to have a much better read on this than I will, of course. What about, like, in the pews? Has this been maybe festering amongst the congregations for some time, and it's just now reached the leadership?
Sorry, so you were kind of breaking up. I'm starting to get kind of like a patchy stuff, so I didn't quite hear the question.
Okay, maybe this has been festering amongst the congregations for a while, and is only just now reaching the leadership.
Honestly, I think it's almost the other way around to a certain degree. And the reason why I say that is that most people that are in the pews don't even know that this is coming into the church. Like, most people that are, what I've found is talking to people that are in the pews, they're shocked when they start hearing their pastor talking about social justice. Like, and they're normally very opposed to it. It's the pastors that are accepting it full on. And that's, I think, the surprising part. What I've found when it comes to social justice is that the people in the pews are way more educated on this than the people in the pulpit. And again, that's the weird conundrum we're in as the church. Is I've spoken to so many people where they're like, what am I supposed to do because my pastor is, teaching about social justice, or saying that because I'm white I have to feel guilty that I'm oppressing a minority, or whatever that is. But this is like a consistent thing. I haven't yet heard or spoken to a Christian where they're like, yeah, I'm a hard social justice guy, and my pastor is just not coming around. It's the full opposite thing of what you would expect.
Okay, that is really interesting for a lot of different reasons. One is, it begs the question: what's driving the pastors to go this direction? I mean, really, that makes very little sense. And also, as somebody who would love one day to see Christian reunification, I have a distinct feeling that this is going to lead to further. It probably already is, and again, you'll have a better read on this than me. Is that this is going to lead to a further splintering of Christendom, where all these evangelical churches now are, people in the pews are going to be rejecting whatever it is that the pastor's putting out from the social justice wing of whatever, and then, but they're going to have their own disagreements about, about exactly what's right or what's wrong. So they're all there's going to be one congregation is going to split off into 4 or 5 different ones with their own take on things. So I don't know. Is that something that you're starting to see happening, or no?
I don't know if I'm fully seeing like that happening. I don't know. I don't know. Just this whole thing. I just feel like right now. I just think people in the pews don't really know what to do. Okay. Because it's like you have people where they're going to these churches, mm-hmm. and they've probably been, a lot of them have been going there 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And they've had the same pastor for this whole entire time, and then they're shocked, and they're like, "What do I do now? Like, am I supposed to leave? Am I supposed to confront my pastor? What do I do when my pastor doesn't change? When he doesn't understand it? When he doesn't see it?" And mm-hmm. that's I think it's putting everybody in a really bad position, because they may agree with their pastor on almost every other issue, but then he starts talking about white guilt, or he talks about, we need to have open borders because of the gospel and how it's hateful for us to turn people away at the borders because we want to be able to preach the gospel to them. I mean, there's so many different angles at this that I think it allows the people, it causes the people in the pews to be like, what am I supposed to do? Because this is coming in very quickly, and I think what's really behind it mm-hmm. is there is this mentality of celebrity worship amongst especially the pastors. Mm. And so what they do is they're learning by reading books. They're not learning by reading the Bible. Okay. They're going to pastors' conferences put on by their favorite pastors. Uh-huh. And then they're coming back with a theology from their favorite pastors and then teaching it in the church. And I think that's how this has been able to spread so quickly, is that if you have Tim Keller or John Piper that's going to be speaking at a big pastors conference to 5,000, 10,000 pastors, I mean, they're now impacting 5,000 or 10,000 different churches. I mean, that can spread very quickly.
Okay.
Indeed. So, and on the same topic of discussing what this issue is and how it's spreading and whatnot, someone in the live chat, Ben, he's asking, seems like the social justice issue is only in American churches. Is it a global church problem?
I would say yes in general, but I think it's a little bit more specific to here in the U.S. and then some more of the Western societies. So like Canada, UK, certain groups within Europe, that sort of thing. I wouldn't say it's global in the sense of I don't think the same movement's happening in some of either third world countries or Asia or things like that. But for whatever reason within Western society, and I think a lot of it has to do with the Marxists in general and the cultural Marxists, they're trying to take down capitalism, and they're trying to make it to where we are that one world government, one world currency, that we see in Revelation. And I think that this is part of how you do it, is divide and conquer. And if they can take down capitalism, then they can really make it to where they can come in with the answer, and then we're all reliant upon them leading the government or leading the religion or whatever it is.
Huh. Now, to answer the question from the Catholic perspective, definitely an international issue. Again, for anybody who knows even a little bit about the spread of Marxism throughout the world, you'll know that liberation theology took hold in the Catholic Church in South America. That's where it really took hold, actually, more than anywhere else. And it has been mostly tamped down, has a very obvious threat, but it's also definitely morphed into the modern into the modern intersectionality issue that we're dealing with now. And even like the more socialist leaning people in the United States, it's not full on liberation theology, not yet. It hasn't gotten there yet, but I would say it's trending in that direction. And they're definitely still fighting a lot of that basic mentality over in Europe. I think it's less of an issue, at least in the Catholic world, in Africa and in Asia, largely because in Africa the issue is more getting away from paganism, and in Asia it's like they're usually living in communist countries. They know what they don't like.
I'm actually kind of curious as to what the level of this issue is in places such as the UK and other countries in Europe, because if we look at other areas social justice is affecting, it seems to be almost hitting places like the UK even harder and developing and spreading even quicker. I mean, look at the whole, for example, the gun control issue. The UK is banning, they're banning so many things that aren't even weapons. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna assume Ginger's you've seen it, but I don't know if you have, and I don't know if Jeff has. That picture that went around from the UK of this weapon cache.
With the spoon.
And one of them had a spoon and a butter knife.
That was awesome. I so love that.
Hey, they were being very thorough in getting rid of weapons, so we got to give them a little bit of credit there.
It was pretty much a pile of kitchen utensils and a couple of ridiculous homemade things that were just. I'm like, I would rather take the kitchen knife into a fight. Thank you very much.
It's like, guys, UK police, you need to stop watching crap. What's the name of that one Quentin Tarantino movie? Magnificent Seven. You need to stop watching Magnificent Seven. Not everyone finds a way. Well, I don't know if there's a scene. Not everyone gets creative with their weapons, guys. Not everyone manages to find a way to use a spoon as a weapon.
Well. Again, this kind of comes back full circle back to this idea of oppressors and victims. So what they're doing is they're trying to make it to where the gun manufacturers are the oppressors.
Right.
We are the victims of the NRA and the gun manufacturers. And what it's doing is it's eliminating the personal responsibility of the gun owner. The problem is the gun owner. And again, we have to deal with personal responsibility. And I think that's really what's missing in society, and also now even within Christianity, is we're responsible for our actions. I mean, any of us could use anything to injure somebody, kill somebody, cause harm, whatever that is. It's not the weapon's fault, it's the person's fault. But again, when you're dealing with this victim mentality, you always look for what group of people can we blame all of this on? And it's really easy to blame the NRA and the gun manufacturers because they're a big, large entity. And then it takes away the personal responsibility of you as the private citizen being responsible in your gun ownership and how you carry and don't kill somebody.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that's been lacking for a while. I mean, we look at even the smallest thing of like internet drama. Anytime anything happens, the person who is in fault, who's at fault, always tries to find a way to put on someone else's shoulders, like the Pro Jared stuff or the Tati and James Charles stuff. Things were said and done, and the people who did lie and did do wrong is trying to manipulate it to where the person who isn't lying and is telling the truth is in the wrong and putting it on them, which can lead to anything as small as just another lie or like things being faked, and it just, no one wants to acknowledge their faults. No one wants to take the blame for stuff. it's always someone else.
Yep. Whereas, I mean, Christianity is absolutely clear. It's like you gotta own up, take responsibility for what you've done, and you got to repent for you, and you worry about, other person over there repenting for whatever he's got to repent for, but let him worry about that for the most part. Pray for him, but anyway.
God helps those who help themselves.
You worry about you, plank out of your own eye, that sort of thing.
It's like I've heard before. God helps those who help themselves. There's also that too.
Sure. We can probably have a long discussion just on that statement, to be perfectly honest. But that's an entirely different show. Now, one of the things I've noticed, Jeff, is that Jeff, are you frozen? You haven't blinked in like 5 minutes.
I think he might be frozen.
I think Jeff is frozen. Son of a biscuit. All right. Let's see here. We're going to see if we can get Jeff back. And let's see here. Well, let's see here. While I'm working on trying to get Jeff back. Here he is.
Hey there. I got disconnected. I don't know what happened. So
okay, good. All of a sudden I noticed I was going to you with a question. I'm like, Jeff, you haven't blinked in like 5 minutes. I think something's wrong.
Yes. So okay. Yes, I'm back. So
all right, good deal. All right, now something that I kind of just want to get your general opinion on is there is a wide backlash to the whole social justice movement, and it's interesting to me because it crosses a lot of lines. You find a lot of anti-SJWs amongst Catholics, amongst Protestants, amongst libertarians, conservatives, even amongst atheists. I've noticed agnostics. It crosses a lot of lines. And did we just lose Jeff again? No, we didn't.
No,
okay, good. Woo! All right, I got scared for a second. All right, so just the fact that the anti-social justice movement, that there's this big backlash that crosses so many lines. I find this interesting, and it gives me a little bit of hope that we are going to come out on the other side of this. But what's your read on this? Like, one, why, and two, is that potentially a good sign for the future, or are we grasping at straws here?
Well, I think it really comes down to there is our country is really divided in half. It's 50-50. But if you were to only look at the media, you would think that it was 90-10 progressive. Does that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that when it comes to even like social justice, there's half of the country that's for it. There's half of the country that's against it. And so you're having a lot of people that are responding to social justice and being opposed to it. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I'm finding is that there's a lot of people that they just need to get educated, whether they're already opposed to it or even the people that are pro social justice. What's interesting is that if you actually talk with them, a lot of times they'll come around at least to a certain degree if you actually walk it through with them. Because deep down, everybody actually really does believe in personal responsibility. Right. A lot of times it's just not, I don't want to be personally responsible, but they want somebody else to be personally responsible. So if you kind of walk them through that a little bit, I think we could make some headway. And I think the other side is that we really do need to educate people. I think education is really the way to beat social justice, because if you look at the history, you actually look at the logic and the rationale and that whole sort of thing, I think we could actually beat this movement. But if all we do is we just keep pointing fingers and yelling at each other and doing the Twitter memes like what is usually happening, it's just going to be a constant 50-50 battle.
Yeah, because the issue is even in the side that's against social justice, there's a lot of infighting within that group. I mean, you see it in all circles. I mean, you see it in the libertarian community, you see it in the anti-SJW community, you see it in this group, you see it in that group. There's so much infighting. It's kind of like, guys, can we... That's what I'll say the SJW side has over the anti-SJW side is the SJW side can actually band together to do something. The anti-SJW side kind of struggles with that.
Yeah, well, the anti-SJW world tends to be a little more individualistic, and and thinking for themselves, and too very often people think thinking for themselves means thinking differently than everybody else, and it's not quite what that means.
Right, but again, when you're dealing with personal responsibility, again, that is a very individualistic ideology.
Yep.
Whereas when you're looking at the SJW mentality and just their ideology and philosophy and theology, it's all about groupthink. It's all about you being a part of this larger group. You are not an individual. You're nothing more than whatever combination of victimhoods that you are.
Right.
And so when you begin to look at it like that, all of a sudden now, of course, it makes sense that they're all linking arms. They'll defend each other to the death, to the death. Whereas with us, we'll have these philosophical arguments and kind of split hairs and get into debates, which I think we need. Right. But at the same time, there is a negative to that in the sense of the other 50%, the other side, they're just linking arms and they're just keep trying to make more and more headway. Whereas with us, we want to converse and debate, and it takes longer for us to actually accomplish what we want to accomplish.
Yeah.
There that is the downside when you're fighting a collectivist monolith, because it's a collectivist monolith, and it's a lot harder to fight against something that's coming at you all at once. Or at least it seems harder. I think in the end, I think the diversity will be our strength, to borrow a phrase. But it's going to take some time to get there, because we'll find new and different ways to fight, to come out on the other side, to present our arguments, and, well, frankly, demolish theirs. And one of the other things that, and this is slightly off topic, but one of the things I've noticed, and I find extremely fascinating, especially in libertarian world, and it's amongst like Gen Zs and younger millennials, depending exactly on where you draw those lines, there's this kind of reverse engineering of traditional morality going on. Like, I've just noticed, like, just in the Twitter space a lot, I notice a lot of people talking about the value of traditional gender roles, and they're not full on to a biblical understanding of sexuality, but there's a lot of discussion in that moves more in that general direction. Like, at the very least, you should be monogamous within a given relationship and everything. And I find it extremely interesting that they're coming at it from almost a strictly practical basis, with very little, at least overt, spiritual component to it. I just find this interesting. I don't know if you've seen this at all, Jeff, but it's something I've noticed, again, especially in the libertarian world, there's a strong pro-life movement amongst that world as well, that I just find really interesting, and it is something that gives me hope for the future. Like, we're moving in this direction purely for practical reasons. How much farther will we go?
Yeah, well, that's true, and I think what's interesting is I kind of find myself as an island a little bit within the evangelical world, because I do find myself, at least politically, more libertarian, and I always have to clarify that there is a difference between being like more of a social libertarian and philosophical libertarian versus a political libertarian. And because there is this mentality within libertarianism, which I think can tend to go a little bit more anarchist and more like, let's just get the government out of everything, and there's no morals, there's no right and wrong, and that sort of thing. Whereas I think for me, I would rather just have a small government and then allow my faith to dictate the morals and my decision making and that sort of thing. But I also do think, to a certain degree, where Christians are failing when it comes to the pro-life movement is that we're participating in the public discourse and the public debate, but we're using theological arguments. And I think to a certain degree we can do that, and I think we should do that, because the Bible is always our root, and I think it's really important that we're always going back to God's word. But at the same time, you're not going to convince an atheist to be pro-life using only Scripture. And I think that what I usually say is that the Bible is true. So we know that. So then everything in the world around us should support what the Bible says, because the Bible is true. And so we should be able to use rational, logical arguments to make our case. And that's where I think the libertarians and some of these even non-Christians and people that don't believe in the Bible can actually make a good, rational, logical case for pro-life, is because it's actually right. It's actually true. It's actually supported by Scripture. But we can use non-scriptural arguments in order to get to that point.
No, and I'm definitely 100% on board with that approach. Like, you don't, if you start throwing the Bible at somebody who doesn't believe it to support an argument about abortion, it's like, yeah, you're not going to get anywhere. You might eventually get somewhere, but you've got to start all the way with convincing them that the Bible is worth believing in the first place.
Right.
It's like your argument's got to start at a completely different place. It's kind of like the whole it's kind of like, hey, you know what? I think my first discussion about faith with this person that I just met is going to be about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. So it's like, no, that's not where you start.
Especially when you consider the fact that there's a lot more people now, especially when it comes to political discourse, that look at it as a almost logical, scientific, and what's the word I'm saying? Almost I can't think of a word, but basically they look at it at the very like nitty gritty base of what it is. They don't. A lot of people try not to bring in stuff like religion and whatnot, because they're trying to apply something to the public with something that would generally apply. So when you try coming at it from angles such as religion and whatnot, it can really splinter off who you're talking to, because it's like, well, that's not going to apply to everyone, because Sally, who's currently pro-choice, is a Christian, but Bobby down the road isn't. He's an atheist, so he's not going to buy into anything you're saying.
Yeah. And I think, when it comes to this strange creature that is called a pro-choice Christian, you can certainly use the Bible with them, obviously. And as far as, when it comes to non-Christians, I've been to the March for Life a few times now, and there are just this last time there was a sign, it's like secular pro-life marching around. I don't know how many people there were, but the point is they exist. I remember even the year before I saw a gays for life sign. I'm like, cool. Welcome to the march, guys. And it's definitely something that in particular is something you can work on purely rational empirical grounds. Now, before we go, Tamara had a question. And her question is, do you see social justice as the next natural step of the false doctrines pushed, such as NAR, I don't know what that means, mysticism, and Chrislam, or completely different?
Well, I believe NAR is going to be the is that the new Apostolic Reformation, which is an extreme charismatic movement within Protestantism.
Okay.
And so basically they believe that their leaders are actual apostles.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of them do have this sort of I don't know. It's almost like we have to establish God's kingdom here on earth in order to usher in Christ to come back, and which then naturally leads into social justice. So from that perspective, I think that does make sense.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think it is. Again, this is something that has been building and building and building. But the thing is, traditionally, it's been within the political realm. And so now we're actually seeing it infiltrate into the religious realm, and I know you're seeing it in Catholicism. We're seeing it in Protestantism. It's it's really gaining a foothold. And I think what it's doing is what they're trying to do is they're trying to flip the traditional conservative voting bloc in order to be able to vote progressive and vote liberal and vote Democrat is really what it comes down to.
Ain't that the truth? Now, again, before we go with the social injustice book, what's the goal here? What is the main thing you're trying to accomplish?
Sure. So basically, what at first when I was first considering writing this book, I was going to just tackle it myself, and then I got this idea of let's actually get a bunch of experts in their fields to each take a chapter and tackle each topic. And so I got 12 different authors, and everybody's tackling a different issue. So that, because what I really want to do, like what I was saying before, education is key when it comes to social justice. And so if we can dive in deep with people who actually know what they're talking about, and also a lot of these guys have actually been talking about social justice for over 10, 15, sometimes 20 years. Like these guys actually know this stuff inside out. And so, like, I've got Brandon Howes, who's the head of Worldview Weekend. He's tackling the history of cultural Marxism and social justice. Paige Rogers, who I know you've had on your show as well, she's tackling the attacks on the family. I'm tackling income inequality. We've got somebody that's dealing with the racial issues, with oppression, with illegal immigration, with all sorts of things. But the key is to be able to understand these issues and understand why it's wrong, why social justice is wrong. And then my buddy Sam Jones is writing one of the last chapters in the book, which is social justice and the gospel. And because we believe that social justice, because it's redefining sin, it's redefining who victims are and that sort of thing, it's redefining what the gospel actually is. And so if we within the Protestant world believe that believing in Christ is the only way to salvation, and that it has absolutely nothing to do with our works, that we cannot earn our salvation, it's only by placing our faith in him, because he died on the cross for us, paid our penalty, rose from the dead, and in that, so we're going to place our faith in him and him alone, and then we're going to follow after him. Clearly, social justice is redefining that. If it's creating you as the victim, instead of, in all reality, if you're going to use their language, we're the oppressors. We're oppressing Christ by our sin. He's the victim.
Yep.
But they're twisting it into where we're the victims and he's saving us from somebody else's sin. So that's why it's really important that we do get this right, and that we are preaching the one true gospel and the right gospel. And I think that's why this issue is so important.
All right. Well, I think that's an excellent note to leave on, Jeff. You wrapped it up very nicely there. Now, as we wrap up, where can people find you? Where can people get the book?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm on Twitter myself. You can follow me at Jeff the GK. I've got the website gatekeepersonline.com, which is where the podcast network is. So you can hear. We've pretty much got podcasts coming out Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. We're eventually going to be coming out pretty much every day with something new. We've got new articles kind of being posted all the time. And then if you're interested in the book, go to socialinjustice.com or socialinjusticebook.com. And you can actually pre-order the book right now. It's going to be coming out later on this summer, but we're taking pre-orders. And if you put in the code Jeff, you can get a free audiobook version. And basically what we're doing is each of the authors that's writing a chapter is going to record the audio version of the book as well. So you can actually hear what they're writing in their own voice, which I think can really help as well. But yeah, I'm really excited about this project. And what was funny was that this was really my dream team of authors. And every single person that I asked said yes. And on top of that, what was funny was that I was offering people a chapter, and I was like, here's the topics we want to cover and that sort of thing. And then everybody said, I feel so lucky because I got the chapter that I actually wanted. And so it totally lined up perfectly. It was a total God thing of everybody is dealing with exactly the topic that they wanted to cover.
Well, I can't think of anything that's more obviously divided intervention than that.
Yeah.
I can probably think of a couple things, but
yeah.
I think that's pretty clear cut right there. So on that note, Jeff, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Definitely. Thanks so much for having me.
It's been a really good time. Actually, I'd love to have you back to discuss who knows what at some point in the future.
Anytime. Just let me know what topic and when, and I'll be there.
Fantastic. And so go get Social Injustice, go get the book, go check out the Gatekeepers podcast network, and we'll see you again next week when we've got Varric the Sarcastic Jew on to talk about being a not completely insane millennial. And
that sounds like pure entertainment.
Yes, exactly. They exist. There are millennials that haven't lost their mind, and they're not all on the Daily Wire and the Blaze. I swear. and after that, I'm going to be gone for a couple of weeks, but Crystal, it will probably still be around with a special fill-in co-host that we're working on nailing down. We'll let you know for sure when we know for sure. So until next week, you guys stay good and keep fighting the good fight.